You don't feel lonely because you're alone. You feel lonely because you see too much. You've learned to smile while your mind keeps counting. You've mastered the art of being present with your body while your thoughts slowly drift out of reach. In rooms full of voices, you still feel like the only one listening to an empty frequency, the only one hearing the part everyone else edits out. You nod at the right moments. You answer when you're supposed to answer. But something in you stays slightly misaligned, like a lens that's been adjusted for a world nobody else can quite focus on. And the strangest part is this: you don't just experience disconnection, you understand it. You recognize the shape of it. You can almost predict how conversations will dissolve before they even end. That's not comfort. That's a kind of awareness that doesn't get applauded. It isolates you, so you overthink. Not in the casual way people brag about. You don't overthink like a hobby, you overthink like a survival skill. You run scenarios. You replay tones. You translate gestures into meanings. You ask quietly, relentlessly, why am I like this? Why do I feel like I'm watching my own life from behind glass? And when you finally get an answer, it doesn't rescue you. It only makes the loneliness sharper. Because the more you understand yourself, the less you can pretend to be understood. People say, just let things go. But you can't. You don't let things go, you let them echo. And sometimes you even hate yourself for needing people. You tell yourself you should be stronger, calmer, more normal. You judge your longing like it's a flaw in your character, like vulnerability is a weakness you're failing to hide. You start performing self-sufficiency. You curate solitude. You turn emotional pain into a private ceremony. Then, at night, the world gets quiet enough for the truth to show up. Not the dramatic kind of truth, the quiet one. The one that sits beside you and breathes with you. The one that says you're not broken. You're awake in the wrong lighting. Notice this in yourself. When you feel misunderstood, you don't simply feel sad. You feel exposed. Like your inner life is a room everyone forgot to enter. And you're the only one still standing in it, waiting. Waiting for someone to recognize the map you carry in your head. Waiting for another mind to mirror your intensity instead of smoothing it into something easier to consume. Now here's the hidden truth most people miss. Loneliness isn't only the absence of connection. It's also the presence of a difference nobody knows how to name. You aren't just missing people. You're missing recognition of the way you perceive reality. You don't just want companionship. You want congruence. You want your inner weather to match the outer sky. When it doesn't, you feel stranded, not because nobody cares, but because nobody clicks. Your mind keeps reaching for something that isn't there, the feeling that your thoughts are not a secret language. And you've probably noticed something else. When someone tries to comfort you, you instinctively scan for the loophole. You search for the part where they will misunderstand you in a way that protects themselves. It's not cynicism. It's discernment. You've had too many moments where empathy sounded rehearsed. You'll be okay. It's not that deep. Don't think so much. Those phrases land like closed doors. Not because they are cruel, but because they treat your inner experience as an overreaction. They don't realize that for you this isn't just pain. It's meaning trying to surface. So you start to build a private philosophy. Not the kind you recite, the kind you live inside. You conclude that most people are asleep. Not stupid, not immoral, just dulled. Their emotions move like traffic. Yours move like weather systems. You can feel shifts others can't. You can't unsee the contradictions in human behavior. You watch how people say one thing and do another, how they comfort themselves with stories that make life tolerable. You don't judge them. You just recognize the mechanism. and recognition is lonely. Dostoyevsky understood this kind of loneliness. He understood that the mind can become a courtroom where you are both the judge and the accused. In his world, people don't just commit actions, they generate reasons. They invent moral architectures to justify their desires. They turn guilt into logic, logic into fate, fate into a prison they call destiny. And you, with your intense self-awareness, can feel how thin the line is between truth and interpretation. You start to suspect that your suffering isn't only caused by the world. It's also created by your relationship to the world. It's not just something happened to you. It's you made it mean something. And that meaning, beautiful, sharp, sometimes brutal, shapes your identity. This is the philosophical layer you might not have named yet. Existential loneliness is often a hunger for moral clarity, not the moral clarity of rules, the moral clarity of purpose. You don't just want to feel less alone. You want to feel that your inner intensity matters. Notice this in yourself. When you're alone, you don't only feel sad, you feel responsible. Responsible for your choices, your thoughts, your trajectory. You treat your mind like a sacred place that must never become lazy. You can't relax into ignorance. You can't numb out without feeling like you betrayed something essential. So the loneliness becomes a companion. It keeps you honest even when honesty hurts. But here's where the story darkens. Because if you're awake enough to see the mechanisms, you may also be awake enough to distrust yourself. You notice how your thoughts can become traps. You see how pain can turn into identity. You see how "I'm different" can secretly become a shield, a way to avoid the risk of being truly known. You tell yourself you are empowered by your awareness, but a part of you might be using awareness as armor. Don't rush to answer this. Just observe. Notice this in yourself. Do you ever romanticize your loneliness? Not to others, just inside your own mind. Do you ever feel a small thrill when you realize you can't fully connect because that confirms you are exceptional? You might call it authenticity. You might call it depth. But sometimes it's a quieter thing, a defense against the vulnerability of being ordinary, of being misunderstood again, of reaching out and risking that your words fall through the cracks. Dostoyevsky would call that a kind of inner punishment, a subtle torturer. The mind becomes both the prison and the guard. You keep yourself trapped not by external forces, but by internal logic that feels truthful while quietly preventing change. Psychologically, this happens in a pattern. When you've been emotionally different for a long time, you learn that your inner world doesn't get rewarded. So you adapt. You become hypersensitive. You track people. You monitor yourself. You prepare your mind before it can be hurt again. The loneliness becomes predictable, and predictability feels like safety, even if it hurts. Then, because you're intelligent, your brain tries to solve the pain like a puzzle. You overanalyze, you interpret, you build theories, you search for the ultimate cause. And the problem with searching for the ultimate cause is that you might never arrive. Not because you don't deserve answers, because your identity is entangled with the search. The search becomes a form of meaning. Meaning becomes a way to postpone connection. You keep thinking that if you fully understand yourself, you'll finally be able to rest. But self-understanding without relational risk can become another cage. Let that land gently and then harden. Because there's a dark realization that many people avoid. Sometimes your loneliness isn't only a symptom of alienation. It's also a product of self-protection that you've mistaken for wisdom. Don't rush to answer this question, but ask it anyway. If someone understood you perfectly tomorrow, would you feel relief? Or would you feel exposed? Would you feel gratitude? Or would you feel alarm, like someone opened a door you didn't know you had locked from the inside? This is where the identity shift begins, not as motivation, not as a quote, not as an identity brand, as a real internal pivot. You stop defining yourself by the absence of others, and you start defining yourself by the presence of your own perception, because your awareness can become power. Not power over people, power over the patterns that keep you alone. You can take that intensity and aim it outward instead of only inward. You can learn that being different doesn't have to mean being unreachable. You can translate your mind, not to shrink, to connect. You don't have to become someone else. You just have to stop treating your inner honesty like a curse that condemns you to solitude. And here is the existential courage hidden inside your pain. You are not meant to escape your aloneness by denying it. You are meant to transform it by meeting it with meaning that doesn't require an audience. When you can sit with yourself without punishing yourself, you stop needing everyone to validate your suffering. Then connection changes. It becomes less like a test and more like a choice. So you become awake in a new way. Not the "I'm smarter than everyone" kind of awake. The "I can finally stop using my pain as proof" kind of awake. The "I see the mechanism and I'm no longer enslaved by it" kind of awake. You start to realize that your sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's a capacity, a signal. A signal that you have a conscience strong enough to suffer and a curiosity strong enough to keep asking questions instead of settling for numb answers. Then the loneliness shifts tone. It doesn't vanish like a miracle. It becomes quieter, less absolute, more negotiable, like a storm that no longer owns the sky. And if you're feeling that right now, if something in you just loosened by a fraction, hold that feeling carefully. That's not just emotion. That's a psychological window, a moment where your identity can rewire. Don't rush away from it. Don't intellectualize it into nothing. Let it be simple. Your mind is capable of change. Now return to Dostoyevsky for one last flash of insight. In his stories, people break not because they don't know right and wrong, but because they want to believe they're exempt from the consequences of their own inner narratives. They build excuses, then call them destiny. They sabotage their own peace, then blame fate. And the tragedy is that the mind always finds a way to justify itself, until the justification becomes unbearable. So here's the dark invitation, and it's also a strange kind of liberation. Stop asking only, "Why am I like this?" Ask, "What am I doing with it?" What are you building with your loneliness? A theory of yourself? A wall? A private religion? Or a bridge? Notice this in yourself again. When you feel the sharpest alienation, do you turn away from the world, or do you become more honest with it? Do you retreat into observation until observation becomes separation? Or do you risk being seen in small, careful ways? You don't need to confess everything. You don't need to perform. You need one honest sentence to the right person at the right time. One act of courage that doesn't require you to become someone easy. One moment where you let your perception be gentle instead of weaponized by your fear. Because the power you want, the real power, doesn't come from being the most aware in the room. It comes from being aware and still choosing connection anyway. That's the paradox your mind may resist. Notice this in yourself. Part of you thinks connection will dilute your truth, but maybe connection will sharpen it, like a lens that catches light properly only when it's aligned. So let's end with a reflective question, one that doesn't resolve into certainty because life rarely does. When you imagine being understood, what do you actually want? Comfort or transformation? Don't rush to answer. Just watch what your mind reaches for first. And then ask yourself one more thing, quietly, honestly, like you're standing in the doorway of your own fate. Are you longing to be found? Or longing to stop hiding from the version of yourself that could finally live without needing to be exceptional?